Welcome back to the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. Okay, welcome back to the show, and I've got a special guest today, all the way from the States, Mr. Nick Wheeler. How are you doing today, man?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, good. People will know Nick as a producer, songwriter, member of the All American Rejects. Good to have you on, man. Another one from like my childhood, like when I started getting into music, like I really started getting into music, say in the early 2000s through to the mid 2000s, the late
Oh, right
2000s,
on.
and that is
That
still all I listen to.
I know how that goes. That means a lot because I know how like formative the music from age like 12 to 20 was for me.
Yeah.
So that really means a lot to hear that. Thanks, man.
Yeah, there was a lot of like diversion, but a lot of great bands from America at that time. Like I love Limp Bizkit, I love
Oh
Sum
yeah.
41, I love you
Yeah.
guys, I love Wheatus, and I've been lucky enough to have
Sweetest.
like lucky enough to have like members of those bands on the show. Like luckily,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, in the intro, it was cool to see all the guests that you have had, and it was most of them like sitting in their dining rooms. Like,
yeah, it's
man, it really knocks the celebrity down a peg, doesn't
but
it?
it's so much easier than going on location, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've never been like a fan of like promo or like interviews. Like, but this is different because we'll talk about music and other stuff too. But like doing interviews for my band and stuff, like that was my least favorite. But had we had this, I might not have loathed it as much.
Yeah, because like I done an interview with Frank, the drummer from Fozzy, when they were over in Ireland.
Mm,
I went to their two shows to play Dublin and Belfast just before Christmas, and
yeah.
I just felt like it was a hassle because like load in days, all the shit has got to be set up. You got a load of work to do, and I felt like you
Mhm.
just didn't really have the time to do it. So I said, look, we'll just take 10 minutes, man, and we'll get this done because you're busy.
Yeah. Well, it's not even just being busy. It's just being fucking tired. Like,
Yeah.
especially if you're going overseas. Um, when you get to be in a band for a living, you just think about getting to play music every day, and you don't think about all the other stuff that comes with it, and the
Mhm.
promotion and the marketing, and nowadays the social media, like all these extra responsibilities and like sub jobs that if you're in a band, you also have to be a social media personality. You also have to be a social media manager. Like, it's too much. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
or if you don't do it, then like obviously different members of the band can do it. But then if none of you guys want to do it, then you have to hire a social media manager and things like that.
Right. It does help to be in a band, not just be a solo artist, because there's one
Mhm.
guy who's better at like internet stuff. And then there's one guy who's better at merch, stuff like that. It does help to delegate and kind of spread the responsibility a little bit. Yeah, I especially don't know how solo artists do it these days.
Yeah, because people think of the lifestyle of a musician as like this glamorous thing, and
Right, right.
it's so lucky and it's so easy is what people from the outside that don't know what it's like would think. Like it could be anything further from the truth. Yeah.
Right, totally. Especially as you get older. Like, I can't imagine keeping the schedule that I kept in my 20s now as a 40-year-old dude. So that's why I sit at home and work in the studio primarily these
Yeah.
days. Yeah.
If we were to rewind back to when you were younger, when did you decide that you wanted to be a musician?
Oh man. As long as I can remember, honestly. I got a guitar when I was 7. I don't know why. I think I had to. pick something to do. It was the 80s, so like I couldn't necessarily, I couldn't just, I don't know, what do kids do these days? I couldn't do whatever kids are doing these days. I had to pick something to do. And I wasn't a very like sports active kid. I wasn't interested in that anyway. And I feel like a lot of kids took piano lessons, but like that seemed kind of square. I didn't want to do that. So for some reason I was like, I don't know, like maybe I could play guitar. And so I got a guitar at 7 and kind of got into it. It was kind of hard to play because it was a full size. And I remember how do I get my hand on camera here? Trying to fret a G chord. I couldn't do this, so I had to do it like this because my hands were too small.
Yeah.
So I didn't really pick it up until about 12 or so. Um, I remember Pearl Jam 10 had just come out, and that's when I was like, okay, like I need to learn how to do that. But I'd listen to all the 80s hair bands and stuff growing up too. Like that's what really got me into music, I guess. But then, like, as long as I can remember, I always wanted to perform and just play music. I never really cared about anything else. Yes, like we were talking earlier off camera, I did have my wrestling phase. I had my baseball phase. But like I said, I was not a physical kid. I was not going to do either of those things. Um, I do remember just like playing air guitar to Def Leppard tapes and shit. I mean, I think this is always what I wanted to do. Um, I just never really thought it was a possibility, I guess,
Mm.
until I got good enough to be like, oh, I can play these fucking 3 chord songs that I love so much. And then I finally met other kids who cared enough to jam and be in bands together and stuff. And that was like junior high school. By then I was like well into my ska phase though. We don't need to talk about that much, but
Ska, yeah. That's
yeah.
surprising.
It only lasted a couple years. Like ska itself, it only lasted a couple years for me. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can't ever remember like wanting to do anything else. So as,
Yeah.
as long as I can remember would be the short answer to your question.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you remember the first ever show you done in front of people?
Yes, I do.
How did it
We
go?
play well. When I was younger, I'm not a religious person, but I was forced to go to church as a kid, which makes me even less religious
Same.
these days. Yeah, okay, so you
Yeah.
get it.
Hmm.
But I will say, um, one of the only ways that I could perform music was to play drums at church, and so I did that. There were some other kids who were, into the same kind of music. I found out later that it wasn't the same music. It was like the Christian rock version of the music that I was into later.
Okay.
Um, I remember playing drums. It was "Smells Like Teen Spirit." But when we were practicing in this kid's garage. These other kids that I knew from playing at church. Um, and I couldn't hear anything. I was just banging on shit, and we were playing Teen Spirit as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
Then we show up at youth group and plug in. There's an actual microphone so I can hear him singing, and I'm performing "Smells Like Teen Spirit," or so I thought. He like changed the lyrics. It was some fucking Christian rock version of Nirvana, and it was blasphemous. And I was extremely upset. Uh, so that didn't go well, but the music sounded great. I was proud of that. And then after that, I finally started to find some other kids that I could be in bands with. Like I said, there was my ska band friends. We did a lot of that. That's when I started playing guitar more. And then finally, one of the incarnations of one of the bands was me on drums, and then Tyson, who ended up being the singer of the band I'm in now, the All American Rejects, was just playing bass. We were the rhythm
Okay.
section, and then everybody else stopped coming to practice. It was high school; they had other priorities, girls or whatever. I did not. At the time, I guess Tyson did not either, and so we were the only ones coming to practice, and we just started writing songs together. I was always the kid who had the recording equipment too. At first it was just a Tascam 4-track, cassette recorder. And then once I saved up enough money from my paper route and my guitar lessons that I was teaching, I bought a Dell computer and a program called Cakewalk, which was a very bare bones kind of Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And ended up recording on that. I was just always the kid that had that stuff. And so that was the first time that like I had a band that recorded music, would go out and play shows, sell tapes or CDs or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I think that whole process, took place over the course of like 8th grade to 11th grade, I guess.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
was that pretty much the formation then where you laid the groundwork for the All American Rejects?
Yeah, it was. Only we had a really hard time finding a guitar player. And I was like, I mean, I'm only playing drums because nobody else plays drums. Like I've been playing
Yeah.
guitar way longer. I'm better at that. Let's just find a drummer and then I'll play guitar instead.
Yeah.
And that was like that's what became the All American Rejects that people probably are more familiar with now. Tyson and I made the first record, just he and I, and then we got some friends that we had met, through playing shows with just hired drummers, that ended up becoming the 4-piece that we are now. But yeah, I think it was when I was like, why the fuck am I still playing drums? Like, why are we like trying to find a guitar player to play all this shit that I recorded anyway? Like, let's restructure this. And so yeah,
Yeah.
that was the beginning. That was about 1999, I'd say.
Yeah. How does it feel then looking back on it? We mentioned that era in the music industry with guys and a lot of different bands I mentioned
Hmm.
before, but they're not necessarily the same genre, but they all came from the same time. Does it feel weird kind of looking back on it, just seeing your music videos on telly, will say your song in American Pie Tree? Like, how does that make you feel kind of looking
Oh,
back on it?
absolutely. I mean, at the time, I mean, back when you're in high school or, just out of high school, I would say college, but I didn't go to college for very long.
Yeah.
But back then, like, I feel like time moved so much slower. So bands that were out in the late 90s were only a couple years off from when we put out our first record. So at the time, it literally felt like a different century. Like there were bands in the 90s and then there was us, a band in the 2000s. But we're talking about like less than a 5-year period. Like I feel like we do kind of straddle that line with like, we've done tours with like Eve 6 and Everclear and, bands like that that really came into their own in the late 90s. But then we've also done, tours with Fall Out Boy and Blink 182. I guess they were around in the 90s too a little bit. But
Yeah.
so yeah, like I do feel like we came about in a really fortunate time for music and, being a music fan for me, like getting to play with some of the bands that I was literally listening to in high school, which is crazy. And yeah, I mean, now like seeing the video played alongside those or doing festivals with bands like that, like, no, it seems surreal. Like I can't wrap my head around it. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was the most kind of surreal, or maybe the most surreal moment you had, like with somebody you met backstage that you never thought, I'm going to be on the same bill as these guys?
Oh man. Well, back in the day, VH1 would put on this show called the Rock Honors,
Yeah.
and I think they only did it for a couple years, but they would take a new band and have them cover a song from like a legendary band.
Okay.
And the year that we were on, we got to cover a Def Leppard song, which, I have a Def Leppard tattoo. To say I'm a fan is an understatement.
Understatement.
Yeah. um, so we were on there, and then Def Leppard came on to perform, which means they not only watched us perform, but they were there earlier in the day watching us sound check and just milling around. And like that same day, Foo Fighters were performing a Queen song. Um, who else was there? I forget who performed the Kiss song, but Kiss was there. Like, so me and my band, who in my head is still just my high school bedroom band, is on
Yeah.
stage playing Photograph. Def Leppard's listening. Brian May is at front of house watching us, and fucking Ace Frehley is over here. And I'm just like, what? Like, this isn't real life. What the fuck? What the fuck is this? Like, this is insanity. Nothing I've ever done has ever come close to that. That was like, oh, and it was in Vegas too. So everything is like heightened. It's like
Yeah.
turned up to 11. So it was unreal. Like that nothing will ever compare to that. Like, that is the story I will tell my great grandchildren. And they'll say, "Shut the fuck up, Dad," or, you know, "Grandpa, we don't know who you're talking about." But, you know, that's yeah, it doesn't get better than that. So that was
Did you
unreal.
get any feedback from the guys that day?
I mean, they were extremely supportive and nice. I don't know how much smoke they were blowing, but they were like, "We should just have you do that one from now on." And I was like, "Shut the fuck up, but thank you very much. That's very sweet of you."
Too much of a generous comment.
But yeah, but you know, to be fair, like, I've gotten to have a lot of really just surreal moments like that. Like, my dog is sitting here next to me right now. And I mentioned Everclear earlier. I remember playing a festival, and I look over on the sides on side stage. My dog used to tour with me too, so he's been to a lot. He's been to a lot of shows, been to a lot of cities. My dog has met Steven Tyler. I've never met Steven Tyler, but my dog met Steven Tyler at the baggage claim in here in Nashville. I just remember standing on stage playing and looking over and seeing Art, the singer at Everclear, and my dog. Like, he's hanging out, petting my dog, watching our set, and I was like, oh, "This is unreal." Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of the modern music scene? Just the kind of where it's at now. Like, it's an awful lot different from when you were growing up listening to songs in the 80s, and then when I was growing up listening to stuff in the late 90s, mid 2000s. Like, what even is it
It is
anymore?
very
I don't
different.
know.
You know, I've been guilty of being a jaded asshole before, and there was
Mm,
a time, especially when I was busy, like, in, you know, being in a band for 15, 20 years,
yeah.
and not really having much time for anything else. Like, there was a period where when I was writing and performing music for a living, I wasn't listening to much music.
Yeah, I
So
understand.
I do feel like once I finally revisited new music, I was like, "Whoa." I was like, "This is totally foreign to me. I have no idea what I'm listening to. Like, music is so different." But I will say, about 5 years ago, I was like, "Okay, I need to make a decision. Am I gonna be the guy that listens to fucking Alice in Chains for the rest of my life, or am I gonna be the guy who actually, like, stays current and, you know, appreciates new music also?"
Hmm.
And especially since kind of settling down and not doing as much performing or touring, just focusing on writing and collaborating and producing younger artists,
Yeah,
I was like, I should probably, like, be a little more current, and my
yeah,
references
yeah.
probably shouldn't be 30 years old all the time. So I did get a subscription to Apple Music, which I do prefer to Spotify. They do pay a little more. It's still abysmal. They pay a little more, and I just like the interface. Like, it looks like iTunes. I've been using iTunes for
Yeah.
almost 20 years. Like, it was just easier for me. They have great playlists, you know. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna find a couple, like, rock and alternative playlists, and discover some new music. And I did that about 5 years ago. And every time I find an artist, I save it to my playlist. And now it's a mile long. Like, there's a lot of new music that I truly love. And I get excited when these bands come to town. I feel like a music fan again. Like, I kind of feel like I did in high school, discovering new music. Or
Hmm.
I think it's in college. That's when you're discovering music that defines you. So I think I'm kind of going through my second college phase with music, like
Yeah.
finding shit that I really love that I'm gonna listen to until 30 years from now, and I'm like, I should probably be listening to current music again.
Yeah. Like,
Um, but yeah, you know, maybe perhaps in the last decade or so, maybe perhaps there was a time when music wasn't as good, or maybe I was just being a jaded asshole. I don't know, but
yeah.
I do appreciate, um, kids are playing instruments again. Kids are playing guitar in bands again. I'm not a big fan of the push pad, like DJ style of performing.
Yeah.
I do think it's weird that one or two people can perform full band arrangements on stage with a laptop, and kids
Yes.
think that's normal. Like I remember like when my band started, there were a lot of drum loops and a lot of keyboards, and for a while it was just two of us. So we had some tracks too, but it was never anything that couldn't be performed by a guitar, a bass, or our mouths. The only thing that was on track was a drum loop or a synthesizer of some sort, something that we didn't have a person to play that. And I remember if you had a laptop, you had to hide that shit. People would
Yeah.
see a laptop on stage and be like, "What the fuck is that? That's not rock and roll." So, maybe I'm old, but I do think it's weird what people can get away with in a live show. However, I do think it's cool that a live show still is the ultimate experience for people. Yes,
Hmm.
people fucking hold their phones up and film it a lot. That's just going to
I
become
hate
like
that.
I hate it too, but it's one of those things. It's just going to become the norm. Like that's something that happens at each and every show.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it too. If I'm like having a cool experience, I want to post about it. Like I'll do it real quick. I won't hold it up the whole fucking show, but I'll,
Yeah.
after 10
I,
seconds or whatever. Uh, It's I regardless of all that, people still gather. Thankfully, they can again after these last couple of years for an experience, and they just love hearing live music and connecting with an artist who, now they probably know a lot more about because of things like social media. Like for me, when I was a kid going to concerts, sometimes I would show up not even knowing what the band looks like because there weren't any pictures in the CD liner notes. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah.
Um, and maybe if there was a video on MTV, you'd know what they look like, but sometimes the band wasn't in the video either. Um,
Hmm. And now there's no
so
music on MTV.
yeah, exactly. Well,
Or is it
some
is it like that in the States? Because over here on MTV, it's just what
oh,
do you call it? Catfish and that
It's
kind of
it's
thing.
all it's just Catfish and whatever spin-off of Jersey Shore is happening at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Disappointing.
so so no, I mean now in kids, it's the norm for them to if they want to watch a music video, they don't go to MTV, and they never have. They'll just go to YouTube or they'll go to
Mhm.
Vivo or whatever. Um, but yeah, regardless, I think the live experience has evolved, but it's still a live experience, and I think it's badass that kids are still seeking that out and needing that connection and that personal touch, even if there is no guitar player on stage, but you're hearing guitars. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's still that live experience. I think that's cool.
I actually went to see the last band I seen from the States, as touched on earlier, was Fozzy. And
Okay,
a friend of mine is he records at home. He's got his own band. He does bits and pieces. Not at a level like you do, but we were looking and he said they have got no amps on stage
right.
anymore. And so everything is just plugged into the PA or whatever. And
Everything is digital. I mean, even my band does that now because it's more
yeah,
efficient. Like, believe it or not, the big arena rock show is not really a thing unless you're the Foo Fighters or U2 or something.
hmm,
So when a band goes on tour, often they'll use digital amps, and we do that too. But the technology is great, and I get really nerdy about the tones, and so what you're hearing is authentic. To
it's a lot
at
more.
some point.
Would it be fair to say it's a lot more convenient, especially if you're doing like a hectic tour?
Oh, absolutely, and not to mention festivals. Like it's changed the game night and day. You're not having to push these big risers full of amps, which we used to do.
Yeah.
Onto a stage and hurry up and hope it works because we got to play in 3 minutes. Um, it's literally plug and play now, and hopefully, a lot fewer hiccups. Actually, the last band I saw was from Ireland. It was Inhaler.
Oh yes, they were
Yeah,
over there. Yeah.
yep, they were. I saw him here at the High Watt in Nashville. It's fucking amazing. That's
Yeah.
right.
Good
I
band.
didn't know that was Bono's kid. I found out after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Slightly different band.
yeah, but real amps everything you heard was being performed on stage. It was just fucking old school rock show. It was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, I'll send you on a band after we talk in this show, that another Irish band that I actually went to see on Saturday night. It's
Okay, what
a
they called?
it's they're called the Scratch. It's a mix of
Okay.
traditional Irish music and heavy metal.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so it's a nice little mix.
Okay. Can't
Yeah,
wait.
and yeah, for yourself then, I'm gonna ask you a few questions about touring and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any show in particular that stands out with, say, with the All American Rejects, that is your favorite show ever, and why?
Oh man. Um Probably. um as I talk, one particular show might come to the forefront, but what I always and probably will always just think about and look back on are the festivals that we've done overseas. Just because they are just so massive. Um,
You guys have probably done Rock am Ring.
we did Rock'em Ring, Rock'em Park.
Yeah,
Summer Sonic in Japan is always huge. We've gotten to do Reading and Leeds a lot. Always on the main stage. I don't know how. The first couple of years we played very early in the day,
yeah.
and no bottles of piss were hurled at us, but there were definitely people chanting for the band that was coming after us. I feel like it was often like Biffy Clyro or something was coming on
Yeah,
after us,
I
and there
I,
were
I
always
seen that. I seen that
yeah,
happen in. I seen it happen in Ireland one time. The
really,
Kaiser Chiefs were on,
yeah,
but Rage Against the Machine were on next. And the worst case I ever seen of it
really.
was
Um,
Avenged Sevenfold playing at the 25th anniversary of Rock am Ring right before
mhm.
Ramstein.
Oh shit, and that's in Germany, so yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. That was a
Fuck.
rough show for those guys.
Fortunately, we've never been in that position. I don't think they ever put us on before like a Rage Against the Machine or
Yeah.
a Rammstein, whatever you say it. But man, those shows are just epic and like insane, and the experience of doing it is crazy. But like all the other experiences that you have in doing those shows, like Reading and Leeds is always just so amazing. And we did do one. Might have been in Scotland. It's not Glastonbury. What are some other ones up there?
Tea in the Park, possibly.
That was it. Tea in the
Yeah.
Park and just getting to watch REM. That was insane. We did V Fest, I think was one. When the Killers just came out, and
Hmm.
the only music they had was that was Hot Fuss, that first album.
Yeah. Good album.
And I wasn't really familiar with them much. I think they probably got bigger in the UK first.
Yeah.
So watching their set from side stage, like early in the day, but every fucking person there knew the entire record. Like that's a show I'll never forget getting to see is the Killers on Hot Fuss in England. Like that was
Mhm.
insanity. But just like I said, the whole experience of doing those festivals, and often they were like in the UK, in Europe, those are the ones that stick out the most to me, and
Mm.
I'll never forget. And we got to do the majority of them early in our career, and those are when I seem to have the most memories of. I don't know if it's just because after touring for 10 years, I had drank as much as I had, or if we just kept doing the same things over and over, so I just don't remember them as much. I remember the first time that we got to do anything. I remember the first time getting to play Reading and Leeds,
Mhm.
the first time getting to go and be on TRL or whatever. Like I remember the first time of all that stuff.
Yeah.
um Second, third, fourth, it kind of starts to diminish after that. But
Yeah.
all those like early memories of getting to come to the UK for the first time in the splitter van, just all the eating on all the Indian food in Manchester for the first time. Like just such great memories, man. I'll never
Yeah.
forget.
Yeah. What is the funniest thing that you've ever seen on the road or at a show
Oh man, the funniest thing.
that you can say? That's what I always say, that you could say.
Right, that I can say that I won't get in
Yeah.
trouble for
Yeah.
repeating. Man, this whole life is just, it doesn't, like, I still feel bad telling people that I do music for my job for a living. Like, this, it doesn't seem like real. So all of it is pretty comical to me. Man, we might have to circle back to that one. I'm sure I have a
Okay.
ton, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Um,
Yeah.
but it's it's all hilarious. Everything we do, everything we have to do, everything that comes with it, like just making video, everything about it is just seems silly. And
Yeah.
of course, I don't look down on it. I'm lucky I get to do it, but the fact that I'm doing it, or the fact that I did it for a living, and now it affords what I'm doing now, which is, just pretty much staying at home and recording music. Like, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talk about the Wheelhouse Studio and the
Yeah.
formation of that and what you're doing now, kind of, I guess, helping people get to where you guys got, like,
Well, like I said, I was
or
always the
trying to.
kid in the I was yeah, I was always the kid in the band that had the recording stuff, and I've always been fascinated, by it. Like I said, I grew up playing guitar, but then I also played drums, so I was like, "Well, if I can play everything, I can't do it all at once, so let me figure out how I can record it and overdub it myself." So it started with, you know, just the dual tape deck. And I
Yeah.
would record the drums on one tape, and then I would play that drum part through the speakers and record the guitar onto the next tape, and then I would just go
Yeah.
back and forth. The end product was unlistenable, but it was learning how to overdub, early on. And then, like, I got the Tascam that I mentioned, and then I finally graduated to a computer, and now I've been on Pro Tools since 2004 or whatever, but that's just always fascinated me. I've always wanted to learn and apply the next thing, figure out what else can I consume and learn and apply. So with my band, I've always been the guy that's made the demos. Throughout the years, we've gotten to work with some amazing producers and engineers, and I've always learned a lot from them. But I've always been the bedroom studio producer guy. So I over the last couple of years, last few years, last couple of especially just from being grounded and not being able to go out and play shows,
Yeah.
I've just really started focusing on writing with other artists, producing other artists. Um, and I do tend to gravitate towards young, hungry, excited artists. And I don't know if it's because we have a mutual appreciation. They're kids who grew up on my band, and they're young and excited, and that rubs off on me.
Yeah.
I do love that relationship. And I'm finally at a point where I can afford to build a studio that's not in my bedroom. So if I could turn my display around, I'd show you. It's in my backyard. I'm looking at the guys right now, working on it. But um, it'll be my first, like, legit space that has isolation, um, a proper drum room, isolation booth, etc. And it won't be in my house. And my commute is only 40 feet, but it is a commute nonetheless, and hopefully it will also bring a healthier work life balance, which over the past several years has been very unhealthy.
Yeah, I suppose like a lot of people may have found themselves in that situation during the pandemic from working from home, from office jobs and stuff like that. It has to be. I'm lucky.
Especially
Well,
during the last couple of years. But I mean,
yeah,
like I said, ever since I stopped touring so much, I've really just poured myself into this, and I love it so much. And I'm always learning or reading, or I went back to school for a minute for engineering, just filling in the gaps of all the stuff that I've just been self-taught on for the last 20 years.
mm,
Um, it's it's what I love the most, and because of that, it's all I want to do in my work time as well as my spare time, which w- which is, yeah, it's tough when what you're passionate about becomes your job, because then that becomes all that you do. So
Yeah.
but
Um,
that's okay. I'm not mad about it. I love it.
you enjoy it.
Yeah, I sure
Yeah.
do.
If we talk about the All American rejects, I'm sure a lot of people will be curious to know. You've obviously, with the last couple of years, every shit's been up in the air, and even now, even
Mhm.
still, shit's kind of still up in the air. I see a lot of bands that were supposed to come to Europe over the summer. They can play, oh, they might be able to play in Germany, but then they might not be allowed to play in Holland. I'm just using it as examples. So I see a
Right.
lot of people pushing their tours back again. Have you guys any plans to get back out, either in the studio or on the road, or are you just letting this ride out, see how it goes?
We're kind of just seeing how it goes. There's no plans to do new music or a tour yet. Um, this When We Were Young festival is going to be a really big deal. We're super excited about that. There seems to be some sort of like resurgence of not just 2000s music, but guitar music. So that's rad. Uh, I'm Something will probably come up, but we're also, I guess, we've all kind of been focusing on other areas of our lives and our careers.
Yeah,
So it's, while we probably won't be proactive in creating one of those opportunities, if something does come about, I would love to go out and do some kind of tour with some of our peers that or some friends that we haven't seen in a long time. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Uh, Touring, I spent probably 15 years of my life traveling and touring and playing 300 shows a year.
yeah.
So I think we did need a break from that.
Mhm.
But I am kind of getting back to the point where I'm like, you know what? I kind of miss that. I could do that some more.
Yeah,
Um, so I wouldn't be surprised if something does come about. But yet, no plans at the moment.
yeah. It's still a difficult kind of situation to commit to
It is.
something, especially when you're trying to finance a tour or something like that, and then it could just get pulled, or
Yeah.
it's very very tricky time. But as you say, like you're working on your own projects and you've all got stuff to do, like so that's cool. I'm sure it'll all come back full circle again when the world is completely ready. I thought over the last couple of years, I don't want to get into politics or anything like that, but I thought we were kind of I thought we were at the end of this, and now even today in Ireland, they're talking about 80,000 cases over the last 3 days, and our population is only 3.5 million, so that's a lot.
Oh, geez.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I've heard whispers of a new variant. I'm not sure what the status is at the moment. But I mean, yeah, you're totally right. I think because of our other commitments, it would be impossible to plan a tour and be like, all right, it's gonna happen, when it might not, and then all these other commitments and opportunities kind of fell to the wayside. It's still a gamble, and that sucks. And I know there's a lot of bands whose livelihood is touring. If this had happened to us when we were touring, one of our first, any of our records for that matter, I can't imagine, like, I can't imagine being told you cannot work, you can't go promote this,
hmm,
go make more music instead. But and then being like, but we just poured 2 years of our life into making this music. Like, what the
yeah,
fuck? Like, we want to go play it for people. Um, yeah, it sucks that it's still a gamble. That's a bummer.
yeah. But things can only really improve and get better anyway.
Here's hoping.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Nick, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you today, man. Really appreciate it, and I
Oh,
really
thanks for
enjoyed your
your
company.
time. This is a blast. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
hope.
I'll send you on that song there in a minute.
Yeah, please do. And
Yeah,
I hope, the first time we ever went overseas was to go to the UK and to Ireland. And I hope that we do get to go overseas again. And when we do, I'm sure y'all will be our first stop. So I'm
yeah,
stoked.
yeah. And I won't bother you with an interview. We'll just go for a few drinks.
Hey, I'll give you a few minutes, but I'll definitely take you up on those drinks
Excellent,
anytime.
man. Thanks a
Yeah,
million.
dude. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.